All right, so hello everyone. We're very happy to be here with you this morning. So I'm Caroline. I'm beginning as a data journalist, and I'm now doing data visualization at Dataveyes.
And hi, I am Ludovic, and I'm a data visualization designer working at the crossroads of data visualization, code, and user interface design.
Okay, so when I have to present what we do at Dataveyes, usually I say that we are working on human data interactions. But most part of the time, my interlocutors don't really know what I'm talking about. So to try to clarify, sometimes I say that we are doing data visualization. So for all of you in this room, you will know what we are doing at Dataveyes. But outside this room, saying that sometimes that's not enough. So I try to tell them that our job is to make the invisible visible, just to impress them. And actually, I find this is the best definition, the most beautiful definition of our work, making the invisible visible, because it highlights the fact that data visualization, it helps augment the human. It makes us see something that we will not be able to see otherwise. So, of course, that's not really a new thing that we, as humans, try to equip ourselves with some techniques, some devices to see what we can see. So we have some telescope, and microscope, and infrared cameras, and radars. But it's not exactly the same, even if the final goal is always the same, to make visible the invisible. Those are in the realm of materiality, whereas with data visualization, we go a step further. Because data, by nature, it's something that have no materiality, so it's difficult to apprehend. And data confront us with problems of perception. We are surrounded by lots of data, but we can't see them. We produce data continuously, but sometimes we are not even aware of it. And data now, they are so complex, so technical, so they're difficult to understand. And for most part of us, most part of the people around us, there are like black boxes. We can't imagine something when we think about data. We have no mental image of data. But in the case of data visualization, making visible the invisible takes a special meaning. It's really about improving our perception of the world rather than improving our sight. And it's not something that is a new idea, that we can increase our human perception. It comes from the 60s, where the founding fathers of modern computing, like Steve Jobs or Douglas Engelbart, they began thinking about computers as not as giant calculators, but as interactive systems. So systems humans can interact with rather than big machines to solve big calculation problems. And this was a very new idea, that computers can produce elements of knowledge that will help humans improve their own problems. And this is what we can call intelligence augmentation, so IA. And this is quite an interesting idea, because at the beginning, when I discovered data visualization, that's really what fascinated me, this idea that we can improve a human ability to perceive the world and to understand it thanks to data visualization. So we are not able to see the data, but we are able to build some data visualization to make us able to see the data.
And what's better way to illustrate that than a concrete example? We decided to do an experiment to make the invisible visible. So we wanted to try to see things and patterns that we usually do not perceive in our everyday environment. After some research, we chose the sound, or the noise to be more specific. It is something invisible by nature. Every day in a big city, we experience a ton of different noises which are, for some, harmful. The metro, the crowd, the traffic are noises that are so repetitive and deafening that they have a direct impact on our fatigue state. So, of course, it is obvious to say that cities are noisy. Everyone already experienced it. But we do not know necessarily how noisy it really is. And what's the noisiest place and moment? What are the noisiest place and moment? So how can data visualization help us answer these questions? How to record these noises and make them visible and understand their sources?
So in this talk, we will talk about making the invisible visible. So we will talk about the types of data visualization that makes visible the invisible. We will talk about the type of data. It's a certain type of data. And more specifically, what we will call collective personal data. And we will talk about the implication that all this involved, in particular implication on our urban environment. And to do that, we will show you lots of examples, because we love data visualization and we didn't want it to share only our project, but also projects that are inspiring for us. So we want to give you some inspiration for at least the rest of the week. And we will also show you some specific example we have crafted specifically for this conference, so I hope you will like it. And to begin, so we will talk about the different types of data visualization that can make visible the invisible, because it's not necessarily all the data visualization projects. I even think it's really a few of the minority of data visualization projects are meant to make visible the invisible. Most part of the time, data visualization aims to educate, to explain something complicated, to make understand a reality. Also, data visualization can aim to raise attention, to spark curiosity, generate interest about something that the coldness of data would have make a bit hard. We also have data visualization that can support analysis, make communicable and readable some complex results, carry out an analytical demonstration. And we have data visualization that make visible the invisible. And when we were preparing this conference, we tried to find some visualization that really are making visible something that would not have been understandable otherwise. And we find it complicated to find those kind of good examples, because we have to find some examples where, for example, raw figures, a table of figures won't have given the information. Some example that we would not have been able to guess without the data visualization. It was quite hard, because most part of the time I think data visualization is better to highlight than to reveal. And looking for example where data visualization is really the thing that creates the information, it's quite difficult. But we find few of them, of course, even if we won't be there. And Ludovic will talk about it.
So with some research, we found some, and I will try to classify them. So there are visualizations that show things that we do not usually see, because they are out of reach of our field of perception. For example, this application on the left, on your left, is made by Richard Vigan. I don't know if I mean to pronounce the name. And it reveals the invisible architecture of radio waves all around us. You can see that at the EDF exposition right now in Paris. So it reveals the invisible traffic of smartphone, GPS units, Wi-Fi routers, cell towers, satellites overhead, and so on. It is a pretty impressive experience to be able to see all these waves, which we know exist without ever being able to see them. On the right, we have the Google Sunroof project, using data from Google Maps to calculate shadows from nearby structures and trees, and taking into account historical weather and temperature patterns. The Project Sunroof website calculates how much money a user can expect to save yearly by making use of solar power. Here we can see the potential of solar energy. That's something we don't usually see. And at Dataveyes, we had the opportunity to work on a similar subject, a project that makes visible something that we cannot see usually. We made a visualization of blockchain and Bitcoin transaction. This is we wanted to give materiality to those digital transactions that do exist, but are hard to imagine. This is the challenge of virtual currencies. They have the potential to turn the economy, but are difficult to apprehend for most of us. Here, we represented the blocks of the Bitcoin on the left, and the transaction on the right. So anytime a new block is discovered, the transaction converge where the new block created. So we use the API of blockchain.info to make this visualization. Then there are projects that make trends visible. These trends are too tenuous, too micro to be visible to the naked eye. And that become visible only because they are aggregated, accumulated on the same view. As an example, we can name the Murray Cox Inside Airbnb project on your left. Inside Airbnb is a website completely independent of Airbnb, which makes it possible to explore statistics collected on all Airbnb accommodation in several big cities. This helps to realize how Airbnb is really being used around the world. It allows you to answer questions like how many listings are in my neighborhood, or how much hosts are making thanks to tourism. And it is the aggregation of the information collected on each Airbnb on the same map that makes these trends visible. Another example showing trends is the quantified self. In this respect, Feltron reports must be seen. Nicolas Feltron is an artist who collected data to describe his life or the life of his relatives. Restaurants, music, journeys, and so on. Each year, he produces a visual report of his personal data, which reveals his habit, his comings and goings. It's why quantified self approaches can be used in the treatment of certain psychological pathologies, to take a step back and see patterns emerging from afar.
Okay, so now a project we realized at Dataveyes, which is a project we made for the French office of Outbrain. Outbrain is an advertising actor, and they have an interesting approach, they have an interesting questions. They wanted to better understand behaviors on internet when people are reading an article, what will be the next article they will be reading after. Because as an advertiser, it's interesting for me to see on what people are clicking when they are on a specific environment. So we create this data visualization with a massive data set of people clicking on this article. After that, I've been clicking on this article. And we try to make a data visualization that is simple, just to explore this question. When I'm reading an article about science, what will be the next article I'm more likely to read? So for example, here you have the subject of your article you are reading at the center, and all around the other bubbles, there are the other subject of the other articles. And the closer the bubble is, the more likely you are to click on this subject after your reading. So the idea was for them to educate their clients, their other advertiser brand companies, to help them craft better advertising campaign. But what was really interesting for us is to dig into this massive data set and try to find some patterns, some trends. So if people reading about science are more likely to click about something like computers or something like video games, and that's not that obvious. What we discovered is that sometimes it just can't be explained why people will be clicking on fashion stuff, on weather stuff, on catastrophe stuff. And all those data are very volatile. From one month to the other, the trends can be really different. So this was an attempt to create information by aggregating data on user behaviors.
Then, the third category includes data visualization that reveal patterns by giving the data a spatial arrangement, a physical form. Here, it is the positioning in space that makes trends of data visible. Information is highlighted by spatialization. And it works especially well with social graphs. A simple example that you can do like we did on the left is to take your list of friends on Facebook, for example, and collect their own friends, and then view this friends network. You will see things that you did not expect. We did the exercise in the office recently, and of course, we discovered that some groups of friends that we thought were very distant, actually, knew each other through a mutual friend. That you can see on the left. It's a graph made with Giphy. I don't know if you already know that tool. And you can see all the clusters converging with some nodes. So when you transpose this approach into the world of business, it also gives interesting things. For example, on your right, you have your Autodesk, which has represented the structure of all its managerial organization with this graph. Here, each employee corresponds to a node, and the links are the relation of hierarchy between them. The pyramidal structure of the organization is revealed. With its evolution over time, the history of the company appears in a way that would not be possible without visualizing this accumulated data over time. So, visualizing time reveals invisible patterns. For example, with Metropolitan, this is one of our oldest projects in which we visualized the Paris Metro network. And instead of presenting it in a geographic frame of reference, with the station located on the geographic coordinates, we have positioned them in a temporal coordinates. From a station, we show how long it takes to go to every other station. Stations accessible in less than 10 minutes are in the first circle, and stations accessible in less than 20 minutes on the second, and so on. We show the accessibility of the city according to the place from which we live, but also according to the time of the day is it. Because in the evening, there are less trains that run and time expands. These are things we can expect, but we cannot touch or understand without this kind of representation. There is also, and that's important, the data visualization that forces us to see what we refuse to see otherwise, which forces us to become aware of a phenomenon. This is where visualization like periscopics US gun death is very strong. This visualization shows the accumulation of years of life lost to firearms in the US. It is so striking because it puts this reality in front of us in a way like we'd never seen before. The same effect has been produced with visualization on global warming. Beyond the scientific debate, the data speaks by itself, and it's hard not to see something so obvious. And finally, there are data visualizations that were not necessarily designed to make visible the invisible, but which still do. I would like to talk about the recent Strava case. This activity tracking application posted a visualization of 2 years of trailing data from Strava's global network of athletes, which represents around 700 million activity. It is at the end of January that a 20-year-old college student noticed areas in Syria, often not occupied by civilians, that indicated the presence of security forces working out near military bases and other sensitive locations. We can then trace geographical delimitation of secret military zones and the sport routine of the soldiers. The risk is high because this revelation can jeopardize military operation and reveal patrol paths to the enemy. So, like in this example, we have tried to visualize the noise which is by nature invisible, but also the human perception of it. It all starts with this simple question: how to capture the noise around us? A myriad of solutions exist, some more rudimentary or more expensive than others. The most pragmatic was to connect a mid-range microphone on the phone and to use a decibel measurement system application to collect the ambient sound level each second. Obviously, it is not as accurate as a real sound level meter, but it's enough to have a raw data set to explore. So, I attached the microphone to my bag and took the transport to work. And the funny thing is that when people started to notice I was wearing a wire, they stared at me and got suspicious. And they probably wonder if I was a spy or a real person. There's a lot of strange people in the Parisian network. And I would love to explain why, but if I had, it would have changed the intensity of the sound and biased the result, so I remained silent, which really didn't help to change their suspicious look. So I recorded the sound I was exposed to while commuting from home to work. And here you have all the data collected on one trip. It's made with Google spreadsheets. It's very raw. But you can clearly see a pattern, like changing from line 4 to line 5, which is quieter, or passing near a construction site. It gives the first picture of the world data.
So what can we learn from all those examples and these attempts to categorize the data visualization that make visible the invisible? So all of these projects are based on a certain type of data that are very disaggregated, data that are atomic, that have been collected at the finest level, the finest scale. Sometimes it's very large time series, and sometimes it's personal data. And that's quite interesting for us because we find that at the end, our ability to make visible the invisible is often correlated to our ability to make visible personal data. It can be data that people are collecting by themselves because they want to, like in the Quantified self case or the Strava case, or it can be data that are consequences of online activities, like, for example, the Airbnb project or Facebook social graph. And personal data are quite controversial at the moment, you have noticed. We have this Cambridge Analytica scandal with millions of Facebook accounts that have been used without explicit consent. We have the new European GDPR directive, which try to improve the personal data protection online and which will require informed and explicit consent. But there is still a way of concern and distrust about this question of personal data and the way major players on the web are using it. In France, recent figures is that 85% of French people say they worry about the personal data protection in general, and this should be a concern for us.
And at the same time, we continue to use our smartphone heavily, and our running application, our connected objects. We geolocate our tweet, we publicly share our emotional states, we take selfies and on which we tag our friends, and so on. So here are 4 data visualization projects that show how huge the sharing of personal data is. The first one, from Moritz, shout out, is the Selfie City project, which uses selfies posted publicly. It is possible to find a large database of pictures showing faces. Oh, sorry. And from which one can extract information on the gender, the age of its author, and many other things. The project, just on the right, is called I Just Landed by J.R. Thorpe. We use tweets mentioning I just landed and recompose the journey on their transmitters. So you also have the famous Strava map that we talked earlier, that show sport activities on their shared by users. And finally, the project we will find, which show how blogs are a very rich data source for sentiment analysis. So I tried to translate the data I collected on my journey in a more visual way, to create a poetic experience, to restore the ambient dimension of the project. So first, I worked on the noise level on a typical path. And to better describe this continuous path in time to represent in the form of a 3D helix, that's what you can see here, a snail shape. This 3D helix is made of spheres. Each sphere represents a second, and its size as well as its color represent the sound level in decibel. During the noise collection experience, I also needed to mark specific moments of the trip to better understand the noise fluctuation. For this purpose, we created a quick and simple iOS application to tag events through the journey with the application of sound measurement. Then, I wanted to recreate a melody generated by my trip data. So I used the Web Audio API to match the recorded noise level with the audio frequencies and intensity. You can hear sounds when hovering a circle, like this, for example. Oh, we don't have sound. Oh, yeah. That's thanks to D3 bisects. which match noise level with frequency of a pentatonic musical notes. Beginning with the note C and covering 3 octaves from C3 to C6. I don't know if some of you are very familiar with music theory. We can now hear the word data, and we call it data-driven melody. So let's hear it. So as you can see, the 3D helix is coming to go left, and we can hear the sound according to the noise level. And it's pretty boring at the beginning, but you have some peaks after. I will just pass that. Oh, sorry. I cannot skim the video. That's too bad. Okay. I think we will have to hear the whole helix. Okay, so you get the idea, but we'll put the prototype online, so we'll be able to play with that.
All right, so we are in a schizophrenic situation with personal data. We are quick to share some information about ourselves on the web, on internet, but at the same time we complain that those data are processed and used for commercial purpose. As data worker, I find this situation is quite worrying because personal data is a very interesting raw material for researchers, and also because personal data are quite often a raw material for our clients, and it gives us some jobs. So we cannot say that we are not concerned as data visualization actors because we are not the ones that collects the data. We are very concerned because, in fact, we are an important actor in the exploitation of those data. And also, we are the ones that better know than anyone how to build some system that can make data collection more transparent. We are better than anyone to build some interesting system to show that data treatment can be very interesting, can be very rich. And also, no one better than us can build some applications that are meaningful, that give some meanings to data. So we cannot say we are not concerned about this debate, and we have to take part to this collective effort to make this current system about personal data more virtuous. So it can even be a new kind of data visualization, new kind of work for us. Aside data visualization that aims to educate, to attract attention, to make visible the invisible, we can have some new kind of data visualization that will aim to build a mediation between people that are giving their personal data and people that are exploiting it. It will be like creating a give and take relationships between those two parties.
So, yes, just one example I find very amusing is Accurate Data Portrait for TED 2017 in Vancouver. Participants were asked personal information about their identity, their taste, and so on. Then, based on this data, they were given their visual portrait in the form of a badge. For example, participants were asked about what they like to read, what their office looked like, and so on. The portrait created from this data was intended to create links between the participants, for example, to induce topic of discussion. It's a good example of how conference attendees can be brought closer in a fun way. It's more rewarding and motivating than a simple survey. Another example is the game Chromaroma. It's been developed by Mudlark, and it's about transportation in London. The game works with the data of Oyster cards, which is the card that must be validated at the entrance and the exit of the underground. Participants agree to share the data of their journey in exchange for a fun experience, comparing with others, getting scores, being ranked. So, on the bottom, you have the Google Maps that everyone knows. But you have also the frequentation of a place, if it's busy or the contrary. And that's thanks to data Google Maps collects on your smartphone.
Okay, so now an example we realized recently. It's an application to improve your energy consumption, your electricity consumption. And in this example too, we are using personal data and we are comparing it with other anonymized personal data to help you improve your behaviors, to give you advice on how you could better consume electricity, how you can avoid waste, and so on. It's something that it's a very interesting project because we are discussing with lots of actors in the field of smart cities, and they say we have lots of new technologies, we have lots of new devices to help people improve their behaviors. They have capped smart centers, they have regulators, but they don't use it. They say that they are afraid of disturbing everything at home. They say that they are not electricians, so they don't want to try. It's because most part of the time the application smart cities actors are crafting, they are not really made for general public. They are too technical, too experts. And that's why we wanted to show that we can use some design levels to help people get interest in this kind of subject and help them change their behaviors. So, user experience plays an important role in how we can make people have better relationships with their personal data, as you have seen in these examples, but there are also other dimensions that can be economic dimension or legal dimension. And at the moment in France, there is a very interesting debate in the legal community about the status of personal data. And I find this is something very interesting for us as data visualization actor, even if we are not doing legal stuff. And I would like to summarize this debate for you this morning. So it's a debate between two opposite visions of the society and two opposite visions of the data. On the first side, you have those who want to monetize personal data, people who think that users should be able to sell their data to the big web players. They say we should extend the private proprietary rights to personal data, because they see how much GAFA are earning with personal data and they want a piece of the pie, even if this will not represent much more than a few euros per year. It's the idea that rather than giving all our data for free, we should sell them. It's an idea that is from liberal inspiration. In France, it has been promoted by a think tank that is called Génération Libre, which have recently published a report about this idea. And outside France, you can find the same philosophy in some services that use blockchains to allow users to sell, to monetize their personal data, like, for example, Datum or Profit. On the other side, you have those who want to develop a much more collective approach of this question. They say that it's dangerous and it's illusory to think that we can monetize our personal data. It's dangerous first because it means that individuals will negotiate directly with the big actors of the web. And it's like an asymmetry of power. It's like David against Goliath. And it will also mean that we give up any attempt to give a collective answer to what looks like a social question, it's not only something that is on your side. They want to find a democratic solution to this question, and they say it will have to be part of the democratic debate. And also they think it's illusory to think that you can sell your personal data because your data are not that personal. First, if only one person tries to sell its personal data, it won't have much value. So those kind of personal data, they get value because lots of people are sharing it. And also, those personal data, there are constructions. There are constructions between you and the web services that give you the opportunity to describe yourself or to share certain information. For example, your administrative status, it's a construction between you and the administration. Your Facebook social graph is a construction between you and Facebook. So at the end, those kind of personal data, there are co-constructed, according to those people, there are co-construction between you and the services. And you can't avoid creating personal data in your social life. It will mean that if you don't want to create and to share any personal data, it means that you never buy something with your credit card. It means that you stop paying your taxes, for example. So it's impossible. So at the end, this second side of the debate, they say that it's impossible to sell your personal data because it's not your data. And this debate is quite interesting. I won't say today which one is wrong, which one is right, but I'm very interested in this second part of the debate, in the idea that personal data can be collective. Because at the end, they even say that this kind of personal data, it can be like some public interest. Those kind of personal data, they can play a collective utility. It can be used for innovation, it can be used for research on transport, research on health. So they have to be protected like a common good. They use the word commons. I don't know if some of you know these legal terms. And they want to protect those kind of personal data, the ones that are anonymized and shared by lots of people. They want to protect them with a bundle of rights. This bundle of rights, it's an idea in the legal side. It's an idea that we can develop a new regimes of propriety which will be shared propriety. This bundle of rights, it creates some rights and duty that are shared amongst different actors, you, but also the commercial actors and also the administration. And so those are very new ideas about personal data and very interesting one because it means that to protect your personal data, it's not probably the economic market and monetization that will be more efficient, but law, regulation, social control. And it's quite interesting for us to focus on those kind of data that are anonymized, shared between lots of people. We can call them collective personal data. And it's a bit the same as quantified self, but for lots of people, so we can say quantified selves. And it describes those data that are collected at a very, very individual level, anonymized and shared together.
It can even become a proactive, voluntary, assumed, and citizen action. Voluntarily, I collect data to unleash the collective knowledge. For example, I share my health data with the Cancer Research Institute. I share my transit trips with my city's transportation authority to help better manage peaks on the network. At the individual level, it is an inexpensive gesture, but at the collective level, it helps to reveal things that would otherwise remain invisible. It's the magic of the collective, a bit like the GWAP, the playful and civic version of Mechanical Turk, or the SETI project, to share your computer's computing power with researchers in astronomy. This paves the way for new forms of collective participation, which renew the quantified self practices and give it a much more citizenial dimension. We could call it the quantified selves. There are already plenty of projects that fall under this approach. The Human Project, for example, starting in 2018, this project will invite 10,000 New Yorkers to share some personal information they create from moment to moment, every day. This simple act will help scientists reveal how all the millions of tiny puzzle pieces their lives connect together. The goal is to help these scientists make New York a cleaner, safer, and happier place to live by solving community challenge. Good luck. For example, preventing diabetes and asthma, or improving school. You also have Smart Citizen. It is another interesting initiative. It is a platform to generate participatory processes of people in the cities. It promotes the development of low-cost sensors for citizens and provides a platform for those citizens to share their geolocalized measures. It connects people with their environment and their city to create more effective and optimized relationships between resources, technology, communities, services, and events in the urban environment. Data Canvas is quite similar. They created the DIY sensor network to measure pollution, dust, light, sound, temperature, and humidity. The project wants to empower citizens to sense and make sense of their environment. They also created an interactive map, opened the data, and asked everyone to use it to tell a story about cities. And lastly, NoiseTube is the same kind of approach, but only for sound. It is a smartphone application that turns your mobile phone into an environmental sensor. Thanks to the data gathered by the members, they want to help monitor the noise pollution. So, the data I was able to collect was inevitably fragmented. I did not cover the whole Parisian network alone. I am far from having traveled all the streets and taken all the lines of public transport. And it will be necessary to be able to compare this data at similar times on several days in order to detect patterns. From my side, I can barely see the surrounding noise that I hear daily. But if we multiply and diversify the data collected, we'll be able to reveal invisible phenomena in order to adapt our behavior and our habits. Within such conditions, most people would agree to share their journey data, their travel habits, in exchange for a collaborative map that would access to information like which are the noisiest area and the noisiest moment, which routes are less noisy.
Okay, so now to finish, let's talk about implications, because those projects are very interesting, according to me, because they help document the city. And cities are becoming such complex ecosystem nowadays. They are the meeting point of a multitude of networks, humans, economic streams, transport, energy, and so on. And data become more and more important to manage all of this. It's exactly the purpose of smart cities, cities that make the optimal use of all the data available to better govern the city and to better manage the consumption of resources. So with more sensors, with more data, we can do better cities. We can make better transportation system, we can reduce waste of water, and so on. So we have two examples, very short, that we can use some collective personal data to help improve the city governance. For this example from Humans, which is an application where you can collect your activity, and the other example is the very nice Ville Vivante by Interactive Things, where some data about telecommunication can help represent the flows of communication around the city. And we also, from ourselves, try to provide some data for better urbanism.
We spend about 1 hour in public transport per day. It is a significant time when we experience pollution and noise. So I ran the 6th busiest line on the Parisian network to see how it goes. And as you can see behind me, I've made a slightly different version of the 3D spiral for this one. The size of the circle represents the noise intensity like before, but I linked a new color along the spiral, which represents the fatigue accumulated over the line length. More red means more fatigue. You can also see each stops as station thanks to the white circle. Here's an example for the line 6, and here for the line 5, much quieter. In order to create this kind of visualization, I used a simple formula to create what we call an Archimedean spiral. But the problem is that the points are not equidistant. So I had to figure out how to fix this problem, and it wasn't really easy. But after a few hours of research, I found a way to correct that. I can tell you that later. And now we can see the result with all the metro lines. Some lines are shorter in time but noisier, and some are longer and quieter. I also wanted to see if we could have a unique melody for each line. So I connected the noise intensity values to musical notes like before. And I got this. We will soon make this prototype available if you want to play the melody generated by each line. This is an example.
So it opens new perspective, because thanks to data citizens are sharing, we can move from smart cities to cognitive cities. So these terms of cognitive cities, we did not invent it by ourselves. It comes from different articles we have read about new forms of urban governments. And what is called cognitive cities in those kind of articles, it's cities that are making the most out of machine learning, cities that are learning cities. Because in those kind of cities, cities are able to learn and to take information from their past behaviors, to improve the way they are governed. And those kind of cities, cognitive cities, it's interesting because citizens are playing a key role in those kind of settings by providing data sets, providing feedbacks thanks to their data. They also provide lots of things like governments and political stuff, but what interests us is they provide data. So smart city is about data analysis to improve efficiency. Cognitive cities, it's about learning from feedback loops to improve sustainability and resilience. For example, this IBM case.
Yes, this example struck me because IBM used cell phone call data to offer new bus routes in Abidjan, in the Ivory Coast. These new routes help ease traffic by 10% according to their optimization model. So in the connective cities, citizens are sources of feedback in real time. They exchange data with public authorities, but also between citizens or directly with the networks. Here, we recognize our approach of quantified selves and the importance of this collective personal data that allows citizens to become a network of sensors in the city. As if the citizens had become the eyes, the nose, the mouth of these connective cities. They collect and provide data that allow a city to be reactive, to learn.
And this will be a conclusion, because you remember at the beginning of the talk, we were discussing about how computers can help improve human intelligence. So we were talking about intelligence augmentation, IA, and now we see that it's humans that can provide the material for algorithms to be more intelligent. So it's like a shift, and now we are talking about artificial intelligence, AR, and we don't think anymore that the humans are the best to solve big problems. We now rely on very sophisticated algorithms to solve those kind of problems, and human will help. So it opens a lot of questions for us, because what will be our work in a world where algorithms are better than us to solve problems? Will we still need people to make visible the invisible? Yeah. We think so. We think we will still need people to make visible the invisible, because we will still need to interact with those algorithms, to control it, to see what's happening. But we don't know what our job will look like. Probably it won't be the same kind of interactions. Probably it won't be the same kind of data visualization. And we hope we can come back in a few years and share with you what we will have found on this subject. So I hope it could be possible.
Thank you.